Oh, sorry. Okay. There are thousands and thousands of children being placed in foster care nowadays. And it's a very controversial topic to say whether or not they should be, how, the importance of them being placed in a family of the same race or ethnicity. Personally, I think that the foster children should be placed in a home of someone of the same race or ethnicity, and if not, then it will cause a great disadvantage for for the students. So I'm going to run through some of the major points, which is that I think that children in foster care, that children are in foster care a lot longer if they are not placed in someone's care that is of the same ethnicity. I think I said that correctly. Also, children could have feelings of like loneliness or isolation if they're placed in a family that is not the same race. And also, I think they could have a lack of knowledge of like their history and where they came from if they're not in the same home of the same race of people that they have. So I'm going to start off by saying back in pre-war times, back in pre-war times, I believe it was against the law for people to adopt of a different race. And I mean, I'm sure that's probably right because of all the racism and segregation that was going on back then. Like a white family was not going to adopt a black child or any other race other than the white kids. So back then, children of color were not adopted very much because they couldn't. Like there was nowhere for them to go. So in 2002, the Labor's 2002 Adoption and Children Act made it to where it lowered the importance of ethnicity being a factor in adoption. So like up to probably in the 1900s, like 1990s, sorry, in the 1990s, it was still like a big factor that like children weren't being adopted very much because they didn't have, like there weren't enough black families adopting black children, there weren't enough white families adopting white children. Like people of the same race weren't adopting the same race. The white kids didn't have as many issues as children of color did, but there weren't enough people for them to adopt, so they thought about the child's needs instead of thinking about they thought of other needs than just like ethnicity needs. They thought of their need for love and a family and all that kind of stuff, and so that's why they passed that law, so that way more kids could be adopted and moved into interracial families, even though they might not get the same advantages that other children would get. So going on my first topic about how kids are in foster care a lot longer because of their race, the Guardian.com had a quote that said, Sheffield's adoptions website today refers to children who may be of black or dual heritage need to be placed in families which are able to meet their ethnic and cultural needs. And yeah, I think that's true. Yes, I think that's true, that they need to be placed in a family that has the same race as them, but also you have to take into consideration the need of the child rather than just they need to be raised somewhere where they can get their culture and stuff like that. They also need to be raised, period, instead of being like in a facility with a bunch of other kids that don't have families. But yeah, so children have more feelings of loneliness or isolation if they are, and they need a sense of belonging, and they don't get that whenever they're not in a family that has the same ethnicity. It can just be to the child like they don't fit in, or they feel like they can't relate to some of the things that are going on in the family because they weren't, I mean, yeah, they were raised together, but they're not the same. And it's obvious when you're not the same as someone, and it's kind of harder to relate. So I can see how children would feel like that, especially if you're raising them from young to being old, instead of adopting them after they're already like established in themselves and their ethnicity. It could be a lot on the child to have to grow up to be, they just grow up wondering, like, where did I come from? I mean, I'm sure they know they're adopted, but it could still be one of those, like, why am I different? Why do I not look like you guys? Like, you know, my friends all have families that are the same color as them. Why am I this color? And all this kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So, my last point is that I also think it's could give the child a lack of knowledge of their history and their background, because I just feel like people tend to know more about themselves. Like, I personally know more about, I don't know, maybe slavery or racism than someone else does, because it affects me and my background rather than somebody else that's not black. So NCBI.com says that whenever families are interracial, it hinders the racial ethnic identity of the child that is in the situation, just because it's not hard to relate to something that you're not used to. I mean, you can sympathize, but you're not going to be able to be on the same level or understand on the same level as a child. So if a white family did adopt a black child and the black child is going through, I don't know, a racist situation at school, the parent might not be able to sympathize or understand what the child is going through, because they don't have to deal with that in everyday life. So yeah, all in all, I think that it's best for children to be raised with someone of the same race, just so they don't have to, I feel like foster children are already going through enough with not being wanted, or however they got into the foster system. They have to deal with that on a day-to-day basis anyway, and so it's just a lot easier for them to just be able to ease into a transition with a family that could look the same and, you know, treat them and be able to adhere to their cultural needs. So I have a friend, and she was adopted by a black family, and she's black, and she had a very positive experience growing up with that family. And I mean, she knows about her history, and I'm not saying that you can't know about your history by growing up with someone else, but she knows about her history. Like, she can, I don't know what the word I'm trying to find is, but she can mesh with other people of the same ethnicity and not have that awkward, like, why do you act different than we act kind of aspect. So I think it's just a good idea in order to get the kids everything that they need without the awkward tension.